Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dig into something a little different
Oh,
today?
I definitely am.
We're traveling way back to ancient China for this deep dive
Right.
to explore a philosopher named Zhuangzi. Have you heard of him before?
I have, yeah, Zhuangzi. He's fascinating.
He's known for his really unique perspective on freedom and joy and how to navigate a world that, well, feels pretty chaotic sometimes.
Yeah, and you know what's so interesting about that? Even though he lived over 2,000 years ago during the Warring States period in China.
Which, by the way, listeners, was a time of intense political turmoil, constant power struggles, definitely not the most zen setting.
Exactly. But even in the middle of all that chaos, Zhuangzi was like, hold on, what if there's another way to live?
And that's what makes him so relevant even today, thousands of years later.
Yeah.
But before we dive into his mind-blowing ideas, let's start with what we know about the man himself. Or, maybe more accurately, what we don't know.
True, true. It is a little bit of a mystery.
It's like trying to piece together a puzzle with a few missing pieces.
Right. And that seems kind of fitting, don't you think, given his whole philosophy?
Now that you mention it, yeah. It's like he's saying labels. Who needs them?
Exactly. From what we can gather, some scholars believe he might have been some kind of minor official.
Oh, really?
Yeah, who decided he'd had enough of the whole bureaucracy thing and just walked away from it all.
Yeah.
Maybe he was searching for something more, a different way to live. I think we can all relate to that.
Absolutely. So we have Zhuangzi the man, still a bit of an
A
enigma,
bit of a mystery.
but we do have his book, also called the Zhuangzi.
That's Zhuangzi, yes. And this is where it gets really interesting, because we're not talking about some dry philosophical text that puts you to sleep.
Oh, definitely not.
This is a collection of whimsical stories, dialogues, almost like thought experiments. Imagine Aesop's fables with a dash of Zen and a good dose of humor.
I love that it's like he's using these stories to kind of poke at you a little.
Yeah.
Make you question what you think you know about the world. Like, what if things aren't quite what they seem?
That's exactly it. He wants us to question everything. In fact, are you ready to meet a butterfly that might just make you question your entire existence?
Because I gotta say, things are about to get really interesting in our deep dive into the world of Zhuangzi. So we've got this mysterious figure, Zhuangzi, and his collection of stories that really make you think, where do we even begin with all of this?
Well, at the heart of it all is this concept of the Tao.
The Tao, right. I've definitely heard of that.
It's not an easy thing to pin down, that's for sure. It's not like a specific code or a set of rules.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just a path, right?
It's so much bigger than that. Think of it like, I don't know, the source of everything.
Wow, okay.
The underlying principle of all of reality.
So it's not something you can just sum up neatly in a sentence or two.
No, not at all. Zhuangzi would probably say that by even trying to define the Tao, we'd be limiting it, putting it in a box when it's anything but. It's more about, experiencing it,
Okay, interesting.
sensing it in the flow of life. Have you ever felt that, like you're totally in the zone?
Yeah, totally.
Everything just clicking.
Like when I'm working on a project I'm super passionate about and I lose all track of time, or even when I'm just completely engrossed in a good book.
Yes. Those moments when you're just completely in sync with something bigger than yourself, that's a glimpse of the Tao. And Zhuangzi believed that aligning ourselves with that, with the Tao, that's where we find true freedom and joy, even in the middle of all the chaos of life.
Okay, that makes sense, but how do we actually do that?
Mhm.
Align ourselves with something so vast, so hard to even grasp.
And that's where Zhuangzi's stories come in. He uses them to kind of shake us up a little,
Oh, I like that.
help us see things from a different perspective.
Yeah.
One of his most famous stories is a perfect example of this, the butterfly dream.
The butterfly. That's the one where Zhuangzi dreams he's a butterfly.
Exactly. And he wakes up and wonders, am I actually Zhuangzi who dreamt he was a butterfly? Or am I a butterfly dreaming I'm Zhuangzi?
Whoa, that'll mess with your head.
Right. And it's not just some fun thought experiment. Think about how much we get stuck in our own ways of seeing the world. Zhuangzi is saying, hey, what if there are tons of other ways to see things, all equally valid?
We're just so used to our own perspective. It's like it's the only one.
And that brings us to another big idea, Wu Wei. Have you heard of this one?
Wu Wei, yeah. Honestly, it's one of those concepts that I feel like I kind of get, but could use a little more clarity on.
I hear ya.
Yeah.
People translate it as effortless action or non-doing, but it's not about being lazy.
Gotcha.
It's more about aligning yourself with the natural order of things, like going with the flow instead of fighting against it.
So instead of forcing things to happen, it's more about trusting the process.
Exactly. And there's a great story that illustrates the story of Cook Ding.
Cook Ding? That's the butcher. Right.
Yes. He's this incredible butcher who can break down an ox with such amazing skill, it's like his knife never gets dull.
What's his secret?
Well, someone asked him that, and he said, I don't see the ox as a bunch of parts to be cut. I see it as a whole, and I just move my knife through the spaces where there's no resistance.
Wow. So he's working in harmony with the ox?
Exactly. He's not fighting against it.
So how do we apply that to our own lives? It's not like we're all master butchers.
That's the cool part. Think about a time you were so into something, so in the zone, that it felt effortless, even though it probably wasn't easy.
Okay, yeah.
That's Wu Wei in action.
It's like that feeling of being so engaged that things just flow.
And Zhuangzi would say the more we cultivate that in our lives, the more freedom and joy we experience.
It's about trusting ourselves, letting go of control,
Yeah.
right?
Right. And that idea of letting go, surrendering to something bigger, that's all over Zhuangzi's work. He wants us to question our assumptions, be open to new perspectives, and find that freedom within the natural order of things. And, one thing he really seemed to question was the idea of being bound by societal expectations, all those shoulds and musts that can really weigh us down.
It's like he was pushing back against those expectations, saying there's more to life than just following the rules. That's a big one, those expectations. Makes you wonder how Zhuangzi viewed other big life questions, like, well, life and death, for instance.
Yeah, no shying away from the big stuff, right? And Zhuangzi definitely had some, let's say, unconventional thoughts on that whole life and death thing.
Bet he did.
It's one thing to talk about going with the flow when it comes to like work or everyday decisions, but death, that's a whole other level.
Right. How do you apply that same kind of mindset to something so, I don't know, permanent,
Oh,
final?
exactly. And one of the most well-known stories about Zhuangzi is about how he reacted when his own wife died.
Oh, wow. Okay.
People expected, the typical mourning rituals, but Zhuangzi, he was seen drumming and singing.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can see why that might have ruffled some feathers. So how come? What was that all about?
It wasn't about being disrespectful, and it wasn't about denying the grief of losing someone he loved. It was about seeing life and death, the whole cycle, through the lens of the Tao.
Okay, yeah, that constant transformation we keep coming back to.
Right. Day turns into night, the seasons change, life transitions to death, and who knows, maybe even begins anew. It's all part of that bigger flow.
So rather than fearing death or even clinging to life, he was accepting it as this natural part of existence.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like recognizing that we're part of this much larger story, something that's always in motion, always changing.
And finding peace with that.
Right. Now, I do want to acknowledge that this perspective, it might not resonate with everyone, especially when it comes to such a personal experience like loss, naturally. There's no right or wrong way to grieve. But I think Zhuangzi offers a really interesting way to think about those big transitions, a way to maybe find a little peace within that natural order of things.
Yeah, it's about finding beauty in that ebb and flow, even when it's messy. And that's what makes Zhuangzi so fascinating to me. He doesn't shy away from those big, tough questions. He encourages us to examine things from all these different angles and find our own path to freedom and joy. Like he was saying, hey, here's how to think, not here's what to think.
Yes, exactly. And you know what's amazing? His ideas, this way of thinking, it's echoed through time. You see his influence in Taoism, but also Chan Buddhism, even in some modern thought.
It's like he was ahead of his time, in a way.
There's just something about that blend of wisdom and playfulness and that little spark of mischief that really resonates even today.
Absolutely. It reminds us that exploring these ancient philosophies is not about, dusting off old ideas. It's about discovering insights that can still teach us how to live more fully, more freely, right here, right now.
Exactly. Zhuangzi's like, hey, life's not about sticking to some rigid set of rules or chasing someone else's definition of success. It's about embracing the unknown, finding joy in the journey, and maybe even learning to dance with a little chaos. Why not?
I love that.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of Zhuangzi, here's something for you to ponder. What if your life was a Zhuangzi story? What would be the most surprising plot twist? What would it look like to approach your life with a little more of that Zhuangzi spirit, that curiosity, that open-mindedness, that willingness to just embrace the unexpected? Think on that, and until next time, happy exploring.